Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Goradia. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share some of this work with you all. What we're going to do for the first hour or so is to go into some somatic experiencing theory. I'm also going to be blending in some of the other trauma modalities that I've studied. But before we do this, I invite everyone to close their eyes just for a moment so we can prepare. And I invite you to feel into whatever structure is supporting you right now, whether it's a chair, maybe you're lying down, whatever it is, I want you to really feel the physicality of the support underneath you and behind you, just so we can ground a little bit before we begin. Feel the edges of where these structures are supporting you and where they're not. As we come into our body, some of this intellectual material that we're going to be covering first may resonate with you as well in the body. So we just want to make a little bit of a connection with the body before we begin. As you close your eyes, you might be able to perceive these sensations internally a little bit better. Take a moment to notice your breath and try not to change it in any way, but just allow it to be just as it is. We're just doing a check-in with ourselves. Wherever you might have been a few moments before we began, your body is here now, but allow your mind to also arrive here in this present moment, in this room. And when you feel anchored a bit and grounded, feel free to open your eyes again and we'll begin. So thank you to Jessica and Dave for the introduction. My name is Nina Goradia. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner here in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm also a physical therapist. And what I'll be sharing today is not only some somatic experiencing, but other trauma modalities that I've blended with it. So over the years, I've kind of noticed when other modalities can increase efficacy of some of the techniques and when it is helpful to just stick with the pure SE. And so I'm going to try to summarize as much theory as I can for you today in a very practical way. And we're going to do an experiential section after this. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can actually apply these techniques as you walk away from this workshop today. So I hope it allows you to have a few more tools in your box. So what is somatic experiencing? For those of you who may not be aware, it is the technique invented by Peter Levine, who's a PhD, and he was wondering, why is it that wild animals seem to not experience PTSD, but domesticated animals do? And so he used this as the subject of his research. And what he found is that wild animals, they follow their fight or flight instincts when they are under threat. And so they're able to discharge the adrenaline that arises in their bodies as a result. However, domesticated animals, because we have trained them to go against their instincts and to follow whatever we've asked them to obey, they clamp down on that defense mechanism or that fight or flight mechanism. And then they are, they're suppressed. Their instincts are suppressed. That adrenaline does not get to flow, and they are susceptible to PTSD as a result. Now, humans, we are by far the most domesticated of all, and we often do things that are different than what we want to do. So one easy way to see this is imagine that maybe your supervisor at work is upset with you, maybe even yelling at you and being inappropriate, and think about what you might wish you could do versus what you end up doing, and really look at the contrast of that for a moment. So you might want to say something back or walk out of the room, but what might end up happening is that you're smiling and nodding and saying, thanks for that feedback. But at the same time, your face is flushed. You might be feeling a lot of adrenaline as a result, but it's not really getting discharged into any sort of fight or flight response. So we need to ask ourselves, where does all this adrenaline go? What damage could it be doing to our bodies Is this excess energy being stored in the body if it's not getting discharged? And does this have later consequences because of this? And so humans, because the fact that we have been socialized to not just be with our emotions as they are and follow our fight or flight instincts the way that animals do, because of this, this is what makes us susceptible to PTSD. And the beauty of somatic experiencing is that it allows us to go into the body, into the limbic or emotional regions of the brain, as well as the reptilian region of the brain, which is where trauma occurred in the first place. And it allows us to feel through these same sensations that we felt through the first time. However, the first time, we often didn't have enough capacity to feel them through in order to discharge them. So what this means is we didn't have enough space or time to feel it through. We didn't have enough support, enough felt sense of safety. We didn't have the knowledge of what to do, and we didn't have enough resources in general in order to feel through the tremendous amount of stimulation that was thrown at us with a particular traumatic event. And so the body, in its wisdom, allows us to suppress all of that excess energy in order to survive that moment of our lives, because we want the organism, the body itself, to survive. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. But then later, we are required to feel through those emotions that were stored, even 20 or 30 years later, because otherwise that stored energy could be running our lives without us even feeling like we have volitional control over it. And so when we do have capacity, we are able to go back for ourselves, for those emotions that didn't get looked at and cared for. And we want to really take care of them, watch them consciously, acknowledge them, feel them through. And this allows not only the emotions to release and discharge from the body, taking the load off of the body, it also allows for an organization within the nervous system in the body, a reorganization. And this is something that needs to be done very carefully. It's not something where we just jump in and relive an old trauma. That would be very re-traumatizing. And so it's really important to do it in a facilitated way where we're just dipping our toes in, feeling a little bit through, and then coming back out to something that feels safe. And we go in and out like this in a very titrated, careful way, allowing the body to slowly restructure over time. And so this is just a bit of an intro. I'm going to continue with some theory. It's going to be a deep dive. So I just want you to know this, but this will be recorded if you need to, refer back. And I have other videos as well that explain it in more detail. But I'm going to sidestep the traditional trauma information that a lot of people may be already aware of. And I'm going to go right into the somatic aspects. And I ask everyone if we could save questions for the third hour. We're going to go straight through with this theory so that it's just succinctly said. And please, take notes if you have questions for later. So I'm going to pull up some visuals here. Now, you're going to be receiving these slides at the end of the workshop, but if you see here at the bottom, it might be cut off, but I've got a YouTube channel that also explains some more of what we're going to talk about in detail if you want to look at it later.
I'll put the links.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to, give me just a second here. Here we go. Okay, so here we have a graphical representation of the autonomic nervous system. And if you see here on the left side, this is denoting activation or stress. So as we have an increase in stress, we go into a sympathetic response. If the stress goes so high, we come into one version of parasympathetic. If you notice here, all the way down here where there's no stress, there's also another place called parasympathetic, and I'm going to explain why there's a parasympathetic on both sides of this graph. But first, let's look at what normal healthy function looks like. This green right here, this green curve, is a normal activation and settling cycle. We go through these every single day, all throughout the day, and this is a normal, healthy part of how our nervous system functions. Animals in the wild, when they have this activation, there is a threshold where energy is released if and only if they are not adding thoughts to whatever they're going through, and if they're not suppressing the emotions that arise. When they are allowing their emotions to be just as they are, they have this increase that hits the threshold, and there is an automatic letting down, an automatic inbuilt resiliency mechanism of the nervous system that allows it to go right back into parasympathetic. And so when we have domesticated animals, as they have an increase, they're going to have some sort of conditioning where we've taught them to obey something other than their instincts. And they're going to either suppress what is arising, and they're going to fall short of this threshold, or they're going to be, afraid of the consequences and adding stress to it. And so that allows them to not have this normal letting down. And so when we look at this normal healthy fluctuation, this is really the model for everything. Excuse me just one moment, Dave. I'm having I'm sorry, my cursor had been missing. Okay, so here I want to show you all the different ways that humans have been socialized to feel and to be and to function in the world other than what is naturally arising for us. So if you look here at the blue, this is when we are suppressing our emotions. Now, a lot of people who are in this category are intellectually bypassing. They might be spending a lot of their time in their head intellectually, but they're not feeling their feelings. And even though these feelings fall below maybe even their threshold for awareness of the emotions, what's happening is they're still expending unconsciously a lot of energy in suppressing these emotions, and they might not even be aware of them. So when I work with people who are dealing with the suppressed emotions, I'm really digging. When they're talking about things, I'm really asking them, are you sure that doesn't bother you? They might be saying, I'm fine. That's what people go through when they grow up. But we want them to really acknowledge the pain of what happened and to start to feel this in the body. Now, if they still cannot, we might do some sort of body grounding exercises, similar to what we started with in this workshop, just feeling the structures behind them, below them, starting to feel their emotions that are arising with smaller and smaller events in their life. We want to increase the sensitivity of our awareness of our most subtle sensations in the body. As we do this, we are better able to identify and locate the emotions that arise from not only daily events, but also from our past traumas. As we can identify and locate them in the body, we are then able to employ techniques to clear them. However, if we cannot first feel them in the body, we're oftentimes stuck in the conceptual mind, and it's hard for us to actually release them. So that's what I do with these people here. And forgive me, my cursor is missing on my end. So, here it is. Okay. So this purple line here, this is for when we are overshooting this threshold where energy is released. Now, an example of this would be, I feel stress from a particular event, but then I also feel additional stress from my thoughts that I'm having about that event. And I overshoot, and I can spin here for years and years if I keep on adding thoughts and then believing those thoughts. And I'm not going to get this inbuilt natural resiliency mechanism release happening. And so this is something that often happens when people try cathartic sort of therapies. Sometimes they can be effective, but oftentimes what happens is that, for example, with anger, if I choose to hit a pillow and I'm just hitting it and hitting it and hitting it, what could be happening is that I'm feeling the stress, plus I'm cultivating thoughts of further anger, which are constantly increasing what I am adding to the anger I'm already feeling. And again, I can just hit that pillow forever until I can just watch it with equanimity. So watching it without adding a story to it. Now, if I can do that and be neutral as I hit the pillow, then I can dislodge whatever energy is in the body, and I'm not adding. So what I tell people who I work with in the office for this, when they're at the purple line, is I say, I noticed that a lot of emotion is arising for you right now, and I want to hear your story. However, what we need to do is feel through some of this emotion. And so I asked them, what if you were to turn your attention just to what is happening in this moment in the body? Let's put the story on hold for a moment, and we're just going to feel what happens. Well, the moment they do that, they come down to this line where the threshold of the energy release can happen. And it can happen in just within a moment. And there can be with and observe just what is there in the body. From that moment, we employ techniques that can help release it. And so there's another group where they have, and when I say group, it doesn't mean that some people, all of their reactions are here and other people, all their reactions here. The same person with one trauma could have been suppressing, and with another one, they're hyper-focused on it and they could be here. So we always look at every situation freshly. We try not to have preconceived notions about where we even think we ourselves would be. And so in one situation, a person might have so much terror, so much activation and stress that they go into a deer in headlights sort of phenomenon. And that is called dorsal vagal freeze. Now here, they bypass the sympathetic state and they are in a different level of parasympathetic. So both of these parasympathetic states, what they have in common is they look like the person is not expending very much energy. Both states are energy conservation states, but this one is with a very high state of arousal, very, very high stress. So high stress that we go into energy conservation out of a sense of hopelessness. It feels like the predator has gotten us. This is what prey do when a predator seems like they're going to win. They play dead. But it's not that they're thinking about playing dead. That's what the body naturally does in dorsal vagal freeze. It freezes. It's hard to move. It's hard to think. It's a survival mechanism. And it can help in many ways. So if a predator does not see us or thinks that we're dead, it might get bored of playing around with the prey and it might end up leaving. And then the prey has an opening where it can escape. And so another reason this can be helpful is it could help a prey camouflage with their background by not moving and being so still, more still than they could have done on their own volition. And so in this state, when I see people in the office and they're in freeze, and this could be because something came up in the moment, or it can be that they're thinking of an old trauma that causes them to relive this freeze state. And so as that happens, what I tell them, because usually people get very scared, you can see it's the highest level of activation, stress, fear. And then, but they might not even be able to speak. And what I tell them is, oh, do you think that you're in freeze? And you know, that happens to me all the time. And it's said in a way that I'm just reassuring them about how normal it is. When we normalize something like this, it's very critical because what often keeps people in freeze is their fear of being in freeze. It continues to amp up the activation, the fear, and it just spirals them. It just keeps them there. But once they can start to look at it without creating any stories, without assuming that something bad is happening or something wrong is happening, then the thoughts are no longer feeding this excess fear energy and they're able to just relax and wiggle out of it. No one stays in freeze forever. And so these are three ways that we can go into compensations that are on this side of the graph. Now you can see one here. There is a way that we can get stuck in a parasympathetic state. Now, a lot of people think of parasympathetic as rest and digest. This is the place that everyone wants to be when we're calm, we're feeling good, we're feeling socially engaged. But it's not like we want to be here forever. We also want to have this flow up here into sympathetic because otherwise we'd never get anything done. We want to have access to this energy when we go to work. And we want to have access to parasympathetic when we go to sleep at night, when we are digesting our food. However, there are times where we can undershoot this and go too far into parasympathetic, and that is going to look like a lethargic depression. It might look like someone is sitting on the couch and just not able to even hold their posture, that they're just, hardly able to hold themselves up. And what I've noticed with people who are dealing with this is there's often not enough energy within the system. And there are ways that we can, some interventions we can do here as far as breathing exercises, as far as even just changing up diet. Sometimes we can be eating really heavy foods that are weighing us down because they there's not enough life force within the food. So having some lighter foods like fruits and vegetables can sometimes just pull that up. And so these are 4 ways that we have been conditioned, or that ways that we can deviate from this healthy fluctuation. So I know this is a lot of theory. We do have more videos that explain this in more detail if you'd like. But for now, I'm going to move to the next slide, and please take some notes if you've got questions, and we can come back to this slide later in the 3rd hour. Okay, so here we have a bird's eye view of trauma. Now, this is a flow chart that I've put together, and it's a blend of many different techniques. This bottom box is actually mostly somatic experiencing. And then I've kind of put these 2 with other modalities, because the first 2 years that I practiced pure SE after graduating, people were getting better. But sometimes they'd come back in 6 months and they'd say, you know, it feels like it's coming back. And what I've noticed over the years, as I integrate some of these other techniques along with it, I've been able to get these results to last longer. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. It's really important to understand how the energy of trauma moves within our experience, between our thoughts, between our emotions, and storage within the body. So we're going to start here with our psychological thoughts, judgments, assumptions, and the story or the narrative we tell ourselves about what happened. Now, psychological thoughts, these are different than functional thoughts. Functional thoughts might be like, I have to make a left turn. I need to go to the bank. You can see that these are just thoughts that, don't really create a lot of emotion. However, psychological thoughts might be like, the world is a scary place. I'm not good enough. And you can see how thoughts like this can create emotion within the body. Similarly, our judgments towards situations, assumptions we make when not really knowing the full story of something, and whatever bias or slant we may have about a particular story. Now, there's one caveat to this. These thoughts, judgments, and assumptions, they only create emotions for us if we believe them. They do not create emotions if we do not lend them our credibility. And I want to explain this in detail. So imagine that we have 2 people come into this room that all of us are in, and I tell you, one person has dementia and the second person is a genius. And both of these people tell you, the world is going to end today. Who would you believe? And would you believe either of them? Notice with the person with dementia, you might feel some compassion for them, but you're probably not going to say your goodbyes. Whereas the person who's a genius, and maybe they work for NASA, we might say, what do you know? We might have a different reaction based on who tells us this. But the fact of what they said remains the same. They both said the same fact, the world is going to end today. So what is the difference? Why does one person saying this cause me to feel compassion, whereas a second person saying this might cause me to feel terror? Notice it's who I lend my credibility to. If I see the person with dementia, I'm probably not going to lend credibility to their story. I'm not going to believe it. And the person who's a genius working for NASA, I might entertain it for a moment. And it's simply that belief, that entertainment of what they said that created the emotion within my body. Now, this emotion, it comes up as sensations and physical reactions in the body. And we're going to actually test this out and go into this in the 2nd hour in the experiential section. But what I want to say about these emotions, did you know that they are actually not a problem? There's nothing wrong with emotions. However, most of us have been socialized that some emotions are the good ones and some emotions are the bad ones. So we spend our lives trying to get rid of the bad ones and trying to chase the good ones. But has that ever worked for anyone? It's never worked for me. And it's a recipe for suffering if you think about it. because do the good emotions ever seem to stay? And do the bad emotions, even if they're gone, do we ever stop living in fear of them coming back? So it's not really peace, is it? And so as we start to work with our emotions, we realize that it's not the emotions that are the problem. It is how we've been socialized to be with the emotions, how we've been conditioned to fear, dislike, resist, and suppress our emotions. Now, when we do this, it causes the emotions to get stored within our body, within our cellular tissues. Now, why did this compensation happen in the first place? Well, unlike the wild animals, which do not have these fears, these dislikes, these resistances, and these suppressions of their emotions, remember, they're just with their emotions as they are. However, we often have learned to behave this way with our emotions for several reasons. One, we were not unconditionally loved for all of our emotions growing up. So if I was taught that I'm not allowed to be angry, I'm going to learn how to suppress anger within me. I'm going to learn how to fear it if there were consequences given to me for being angry. Another reason that this happens is due to trauma. So like we spoke about in the beginning, if I have a lot of stimulation coming at me, so you can think of trauma in a somatic perspective as a lot of stimulation coming at me without enough capacity or resources to be able to process it. And so when I have that coming up, I don't have the resources and I need to survive this moment. I'm going to suppress this energy within my body so that I can have a fight or flight response to survive the moment, to get away from whatever the trigger is. But it doesn't mean I got rid of or I got away from the emotions that arose as a result of the trigger. These emotions are oftentimes still with me. Now, when these emotions are pushed down into our body, they can show up in a lot of the classic ways that we may know of, just intuitively, jaw tension associated with anger, neck and shoulder tension. These are the ones we know, butterflies in the stomach, but it can also show up in many unique ways that we're not familiar with. And so we're gonna explore that in the experiential section. But what I want to say about this box, this is our unconscious material. We may not even know it's there. A lot of this happened even before the age of 2. Much of it happened before the age of 8. Because before the age of 8, our brains are designed in a way that whatever happens to us in life, we are assuming it is because of us. It is our own fault. And so a lot of this gets stored before we have the discernment to realize that other people are responsible for their behavior, for their emotions. So say like in my unconscious material, I have had a history of abandonment. Well, I'm actually going to start to view the world through this filter of abandonment. And this material creates and informs my thoughts. To see how interconnected this material is, how it loops in all different directions. So for example, if I have a history of abandonment, the types of thoughts I'm likely going to have are, does that person like me? Did I say something that is going to make them go away? Because I'm trying to manage this emotional material. I'm in fact trying not to feel it because I was never taught how and I was never allowed to. I didn't have the resources to feel it. So my thoughts are helping me not feel many of my stored emotions. Now, say like here, my history is I was a victim of some sort of violence. Then my thoughts, my filter through which I see the world, maybe, is that person safe? Are they dangerous? And so notice how our filters, they're not objective. They are very much colored by our history and by our past experiences and traumas. So if you see here so far, what we've covered is the types of thoughts that we are believing create the emotions in our body. They would not create them otherwise. And we'll go into this in more detail so you can see this to be true. When we have these emotions in the body and we resist or suppress them in some way, they get stored in the body. This colors the lens through which we see the world, and that further reinforces the types of thoughts that we're having. This is why many people have explored several different types of modalities to get some relief and then to not get full relief, or maybe the issue comes back. And so when I was practicing the pure somatic experiencing work and releasing past traumas, I was having great results. But if I was not addressing the types of thinking a person was having, and if they were believing them and their relationship with their emotions and trying to make friends with them, what could happen is they could recreate the same felt sense of trauma. Those same neural grooves are there. And even if they don't have a repeat trauma, their conditioning can lead to them feeling like it's back. So it's really important we address all the places that this cycle is reinforced. And that's going to bring me here to the left side. These 5 different ways that we can interrupt this cycle in order to actually move a trauma. So first, we're going to look at disidentification with our thoughts. So a lot of us walk around thinking that we are our thoughts, but let's evaluate that for a moment. If I was my thoughts, well, wouldn't they be with me every single moment of my life if I truly was them, if that was my identity? But my thoughts come and go, and yet I stay the same. So am I my thoughts, or am I simply the witness to my thoughts? I'm going to skip down to this third one because it's very similar, and this can also help clarify it. I find that oftentimes this first one is the most challenging for people to see through when we first look at these 5. So let's look at it in the context of emotions. If I disidentify from my emotions, I can see that I am not my emotions. They are not my identity. If I have anger in this moment, does that make me an angry person? Or does that make me a person who is simply experiencing anger in this moment? If I was my emotion, wouldn't I be angry in every single moment of my life? But I'm not. I have these constant changes in how I'm feeling, and yet I am the witness to them. So when I disidentify, I realize it is not my identity. It is still part of my experience that is very relevant. However, it is not who I am. When I do that, I get some space between me and the emotion. Similarly, I get space between me and my thoughts. I am no longer so close to them that I cannot see anything beyond them. I am not so close to them that I simply react based on what they are telling me. Rather, I have the space and the capacity to now respond to them. So let's come back up here to the second one. Now remember, thoughts, they're not a problem unless I believe the ones that are not correct, the ones that are not true, and most of them aren't true. And so what do I do though if I'm habitually believing something? So say like no one came to my ballet recital when I was 5, and as a 5-year-old just trying to figure out the world and not knowing any better, I assumed that it simply meant that something is wrong with me, I'm not good enough. Well, if I've not consciously and deliberately tried to disprove this later in life, I could be subconsciously carrying this belief with me well into my 40s and 50s. So what I need to do in order to interrupt this part of the cycle is I need to actively learn how to disprove this by asking questions. Does that really mean that I'm not good enough? Does people not coming to my show actually have anything to do with my worth as a human being? I need to go into that in detail. Once I disprove this belief, it actually renders this belief powerless. I may still hear it. I cannot always, choose what thoughts are arriving in my head, because anything I've ever heard in my entire life is fair game to pop in my head at any moment. Anything my parents said, anything I saw on TV, anything I saw in a stand-up comedy show, it can pop in my head. Because the brain is like an antenna, it's a receiver. It's just receiving things. But if I then think that I am my thoughts, well, then I'm going to start making judgments towards myself. How could you have that sort of thought? Well, have any of you ever had a thought that you didn't mean to even have? And you heard something and you thought, oh, I wish that wasn't in my head. Well, that's not your original thought at all. That's something that the receiver absorbed, and it's just in your awareness. And so it's important to not identify with it. Otherwise, it's going to cause further emotions. I can create a further belief. Oh, this means I'm a bad person because I had this negative thought. And see, I'm going to spiral deeper and deeper into this cycle. So it's very important we have the space between identification with thoughts, the space between identification with feelings. We start questioning thoughts. Are they true? Is that true? So the thought might still arise, but once I have rendered it powerless by disproving it, it then only sounds like gibberish on the radio. We do not have to buy into what it is trying to sell us. So let's go down here to number 4. Now, remember, emotions are not a problem at all. They're only a problem when we resist and suppress them. That is when we feel the pain of them, the density, the intensity of the emotion. Otherwise, it actually doesn't feel that bad when we're not resisting an emotion, even the most painful ones you can imagine. And I don't ask you to believe me. We're going to try it out in the next section. But if the problem is simply that we're resisting them, what is
the diagram?
Pardon? You can't see the diagram?
Right.
On my side, it shows that it's still sharing. Do you see the diagram?
I do.
I see.
Yeah, we still see the diagram here. It might be on your settings. And so luckily this will be recorded and can be accessed later. So if the only problem with these emotions is that we're resisting or suppressing them, what is the intervention here? It is to learn how to make friends with these emotions. When I befriend them, and we're going to go into specific techniques, when I befriend them, we notice immediately they don't hurt as much. They don't feel as tight. They don't feel as constricted. They start to, you know, this might be hard to believe, they start to in fact feel pleasant when we're not resisting them. And so once I make friends with my emotions, they are no longer getting stored in the body. What happens when I make friends with them by allowing them, loving them, accepting them? When I do this, they actually pass through my body and out of my body many of the times. Sometimes they'll stay, and that's not a problem, because remember, emotions are not the problem. I'm simply trying to get rid of my resistance to them. I am a sentient being who's designed to feel all the feelings of the rainbow, all the spectrum of emotions. So I will never, ever escape my biology. To have a goal to not be feeling one's emotions is not a practical goal. The goal would be to make friends with my emotions, to not be at war with the emotions that will inevitably arise within me. It's very important to understand this, because many people are on a journey of, quote, fixing themselves, thinking that it's bad that they are feeling. Feeling is what makes you an empathetic human being. Feeling is what helps you connect with the rest of humanity. Feeling is what gives you meaning in your life. And so it's very important to realize that the feelings are not the problem. It's simply the resistance. When I befriend my emotions, they pass through my body, which is what they were originally intended to do. That process got interrupted by trauma, a lack of resources or capacity, or by being shamed or not loved for certain emotions that arose within me. In Latin, emotion means that which passes through. And so that's exactly what happens when we make friends with our feelings. Finally, we're going to come down to our unconscious material that is stored within the body. The way that we do this is we learn how to observe the sensations that arise when we think of these traumas, and we observe them objectively. I do not recommend doing this bottom part on your own at all. It took me maybe 8 or 9 years of doing this work professionally for other people, even before I started doing this part on myself. The reason is, when we have trauma, the definition of trauma is I did not have the resources or capacity to handle it. And so it got suppressed. So if I'm going to revisit one of my own traumas, especially if it's a big one, I better be bringing with me far more resources than the last time I left it with. Otherwise, it's very easy to get sucked into the trauma vortex. It's much better, much safer to work with somebody who's trained, who can also provide that additional space for you, and that you can do this safely where you don't get sucked in. You just do it step by step, piece by piece, in a way that is safe and on your own terms. But the gist of this part is that what you will do is observe the sensations objectively, allow them, befriend them using particular techniques. The more you work on your unconscious material, you will have less and less material here. This box becomes smaller and smaller. You start getting less and less racing thoughts that are trying to protect you from feeling your emotions. And so it's very important to be working on all of these 5. Now you can see at the same time, or, within the same month or 2, in order to actually move a particular trauma event from your body and from your recreating it. And so I know that was really, really heavy and dense theory. It's a lot to take in, and I did not, understand all of this the first time I was exposed to it. It's really going to take some time, but I'm going to leave it here for now, and we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, this is a slide that is from Ruby Jo Walker. She's adapted this information from Cheryl Sanders, Steve Hoskinson, Stephen Porges, and Peter Levine. Now, Peter Levine is the founder of Somatic Experiencing. Stephen Porges is the one who came up with Polyvagal Theory. And this slide, it talks about Polyvagal Theory in a graphical representation. I'm going to just briefly talk about a few points here because Polyvagal Theory is extremely complex. And so we're just going to briefly go over it. Now, if I were to go back, let me see if I can go back 2 slides here briefly. Now, remember this healthy fluctuation that's in green? So these are sympathetic activation and parasympathetic settling cycles, okay? So this is important to remember. And so now on this slide, that's what is here. Down here is the healthy fluctuations going into sympathetic. These are normal throughout the day. However, when I have a fight or flight response, I'm going to have a large swing up here into sympathetic. And if it's a very, very large amount of energy, I'm going to go into that dorsal vagal freeze response. Remember that red line in that previous graphic. And so when I'm here in sympathetic, this is fight or flight. This is where I still feel like I can do something about my situation. I still have some sense of power. However, when I go so far into the terror, I will feel like I can't. This is why we go into energy conservation mode. I'm going to have all sorts of sensations, but the main one here is dissociation. I'm going to not even feel like I'm myself. I might be, living in dissociation for years of my life. Shame is a big one here. I could be dissociated, feeling shame, unable to feel other sorts of emotions down here, like joy and groundedness and compassion. It's just hard to access. This is literally a preparation for death when a wild animal thinks that there's no hope. And so when we have some sort of deactivation, we can get a release when I employ certain techniques or when I'm able to be with my experience without adding to it and without suppressing it. Now, the reason polyvagal theory, one reason why it's so interesting is because there's the opposite here, ventral vagal response. This is the opposite of the dorsal vagal. And this is, this just means it's the front of the vagus nerve, and this is the back of the vagus nerve. But when I'm in parasympathetic, that's when I'm relaxed, I can socially engage, I feel safe, I feel connection with other people. What's really interesting though is that going straight into social engagement can also oftentimes pull me into parasympathetic. So it can go in both directions. Being in parasympathetic allows me to socially engage. Socially engaging can help pull me into parasympathetic. This is really important way for us to resource. As we are able to connect with other people, it keeps on bringing our set point downward. Now, what I mean by set point, now see here in this graphic, this is the person's set point. This is where they are activation-wise, arousal-wise, stress-wise, and they're going in activation and settling cycles around this point. However, the more trauma a person has gone through, this line continues to go higher and higher and higher. So somebody's baseline set point can be so high that that's why they might have a very exaggerated startle response. So, it's like when you go up behind someone and you kind of go like this and they jump really big. It's because they're so amped up already at their set point that they have very little buffer or room before they get driven into a fight or flight or even a freeze response. And so the more unconscious material we clear, like in that previous slide, and the more that we are being with our experience in our daily experience, staying on top of it, being our authentic selves as much as it feels safe within our environment. As we do that, we are going to be bringing that set point lower and lower. That gives us more and more room with which to respond, rather than to be so high that we can't help but go into an automatic reaction. So when you see somebody in life that's flying off the handle real quickly, you know, I encourage people not to judge. Of course, it's great to have your boundaries and protect yourself, but we actually don't know what that person went through and what they're going through internally in their nervous system. So this is just a brief summary of certain aspects of this slide. I'm going to pause here for a bit of a break before. And as Jessica mentioned in the beginning, we'll do the raising hands, and she'll be taking care of that. So I'm open to asking any, or to answering any questions that people may have. Let's do questions first, and then if we've got time after the questions, then people can feel free to share their experiences during the experiential section. But I just want to make sure we get as many questions answered as possible. Oh, and before we take the question, let me just say, I want to mention at the experiential part, when the density gets lighter, the further we work with something, it means that we are having less resistance to the emotion. When the color gets lighter, it means the same thing. So we're objectively looking at ways to evaluate how much resistance we have to an emotion this way. The emotion might be getting larger and larger, but if the density is decreasing, we're still going in the direction of reducing our resistance to simply feeling the emotion. Like or the opposite, the emotion could be getting smaller and smaller, and that is also the resistance coming down. And so these are different ways where we can evaluate if the technique is working for you or not. Now, if it's getting harder and harder, that technique is not working, and we need to switch to something else, or we need to switch to a different dialogue. I use many dialogues in my practice, and the purpose of all of them is simply one purpose: to reduce the mental resistance to simply feeling the feeling fully. Once we are able to feel it through, we're no longer at this war within ourselves, trying to avoid feeling it. And so you can notice the effects within you. So that's all I'll say. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
So we're going to go in the order of hands raised that I can see on Zoom. And the first hand that I see raised is a phone with a 916 area code. So that hand was raised before this section. So I don't know if you were just lining up for the Q&A, but if you do want to share, this is a good opportunity to do so. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, that was during the experiential portion that I raised my hand. So I don't have a question.
Okay.
Thank you for addressing.
Thank you for participating. Okay. All right. Next raised hand I see is Joe R. If you can unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your service and for the meeting. I wanted to ask, I got into the part where you said, what does it feel like? Is it gas, liquid, dense, color? And then I don't remember anything else. I could feel this, that my body, I was like, oh, like your body's relaxing, almost like when you sort of, not meditation, but like when I've had acupuncture before, after the initial shock, then there's this kind of dreamy state. And then I sort of came to, and I was like, I have no idea what this woman has been talking about. Is that normal? Is it normal to just kind of, because I'm going to have to re-watch to try and do the process, but is that normal to kind of almost go into sort of a sleep, but you're not asleep?
So just a quick question. Were you, you started from the very beginning of the experiential? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have been told that my voice puts people to sleep before. So if you got really relaxed, sometimes that can happen, but you know what? It just means you went into a parasympathetic state, and then that's wonderful. Maybe that's just what your body needed at this time. It just went into a place where it felt safe enough that it could rest, and that's all that was needed at that time. And so if I was individually facilitating for you, I would have just allowed for that to happen until you came out of it, and then we would do some more work. So
Okay,
it's
all right.
totally fine.
All right, thank you. I'll rewatch and try again with the whole exercise. Thank you.
The exercise, unfortunately, was not recorded,
Oh,
but yeah, because of so many reasons, privacy, and also we want people to feel like we want them to be facilitated and it just not be out there where people can be unguided and get hurt. But yeah, there will be other opportunities for this.
Okay, or if there's anywhere I could find something like that on YouTube, a guided sort of thing, what you've just done.
Not that I know of. I can tell you that in 2021, I'm going to be putting together a healing curriculum. I'm going to be offering this on Patreon because I don't want it to be out there where, so I actually know of somebody, a client of mine watched a video somewhere and then was hospitalized because of the effects of watching that video because no one was guiding her. Okay. And so I'm not going to put any of my stuff out there in a way that people are not safe. But when I do it on Patreon, it's going to be very affordable, but I'm going to be there so that I can facilitate. So if there's an emergency, and so for anyone who's interested in this work in the future, you can subscribe on my to my newsletter from my website, and you will be notified of when this is available. So otherwise, you can do some searching for SE sessions if you want to observe. There are people who put sessions, but I haven't seen one yet that's guided, but it could be out there and I might just not be aware.
Okay, just one last thing for where would you go if you had really bad trauma which doesn't allow you to sleep, it stops you from feeling safe with people, etc., etc.? Where would you go right now? What would your advice be?
I would see a somatic experiencing practitioner. And we've got the link on the last slide of mine. Everyone's going to get the slides. I think Dave is also going to post them in the chat. But there is a website where you can look up an SE practitioner in your area. And so you can just go by city, by state, by country. And for those of you who may not have someone in your area, or if you want to work with the person I go to when I get sessions, I put her information on that slide too. Her name is Tatiana. She's my mentor. The only reason she's not full is because she doesn't have an internet presence. Like my practice is full for the next 3 or 4 months just because I have an internet presence. So if anyone really wants to work with me, they can still sign up through my website, but it's not going to be till February. But if you want to see somebody right away, I think Tatiana is a wonderful person to work with. And then you could also search for somebody in your area.
Okay, from the slide, it puts us in contact with you.
Yeah, you can be. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Pleasure.
I appreciate.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next hand I see is B.
Hi, thank you for that. That was so good. That was really good. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed to hear that wasn't recorded because the whole time I was just thinking I really want to do this again with lots of other moments. So it's a shame that we can't have the transcript of it because that really I have a lot of trouble connecting with my emotions, a lot of fear. But that really worked really, really well. It was great.
I'm glad you got an experience of it to see that it works. And then what we're going to do on Patreon, we're going to have something like that recorded, but I'm just going to be doing it with people who I know are screened for safety. So the fact that you did okay with this, then you'd automatically be somebody who could access a recording of that. It's just created these things yet. So I want to make this applicable and accessible to lots of people. I just have to do it in a way where people are screened for safety.
Yeah.
So please stay tuned for that.
That's great. So I mean, I didn't pick a traumatic event, but that I've been doing EMDR with my therapist, but I always I always dissociate when I'm doing the EMDR, and I just can't seem to I can't seem to go there. Would this kind of thing be better for me, do you think? Because I just can't stay, I just dissociate and fly away. So I feel like I'm never going to process this trauma because I can't stay grounded.
It doesn't mean that you won't be able to process it. So it just means that the EMDR, oftentimes people can get a little bit of a overstimulation from it, especially if their nervous system is very sensitive or, you know, has had a lot of trauma. The somatic experiencing is the gentler of the two approaches usually. Because the EMDR is protocol driven, they kind of have to go from step 1 to step 2 and step 3. And if you can't do it, then, you know, you can't do it, or they have to change the protocol. With SE, or whoever's working with you is always looking at your sympathetic and parasympathetic body cues and evaluating constantly. And we're changing what we do based on what we're seeing. So it's facilitated according to where you are. And so there are a lot of people who are overstimulated with EMDR, and then the EMDR therapist will refer them to SE. So
Right.
I would choose something like that. I'd find an SE practitioner that can work with you in a gentler capacity, because dissociation means that you're getting overstimulated, and then the mind is checking out because it's just too much to process. But it does not mean you will not be able to process it. You just have to take it in smaller chunks.
Okay. And just one final question. Could I use this, because I get very scared of the dissociation itself. Can I maybe use this technique on the actual dissociation?
Not really. I would not try to do that by yourself. So the dissociation is really, it just means, hey, we need to stop whatever we're doing. It is too much, and we need to be resourcing. So I do have a video on my YouTube channel about physical resourcing techniques by Peter Levine. And so if maybe we could find a link for that if you're able to look on the YouTube channel and get that one. We'll post that link. But if you're dissociating, you need to be doing things like, you know, one of the things he does is like the self-hug. So the deep pressure, you can get a weighted blanket, one hand on the forehead, one hand on the chest, not with weight. These are just the weight of your hands, whereas this is the deep pressure sort of hug. But you want to do grounding things to feel good. You want to, you know, what we did with the pendulation exercise and the experiential portion, you want to find a place in your body that feels good and really keep your attention there, and then just allow yourself to enjoy that. You don't want to be doing extra work when you're dissociated, trying to clear more and more and more. The body is just completely maxed out, and you have to take care of yourself. You can be smelling an essential oil. You could be fiddling with what do they call those things? Those fidget devices in your hand. You could be touching textures. You have to get back into the body when you're dissociated, and you have to take the load off of the body. So you can't keep working your trauma when that happens.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, that's really helpful. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's see. I think next we have Carrie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for offering this today. My question is, at the very beginning, how you showed the different levels, like with the 4 different colors. I found myself feeling like, wow, I think I go into that dorsal vagal freeze easily. And I wonder if that is because I live, like my threshold is just way up there, and it doesn't, I feel like I fly off the handle really easily. Like I'm fine. And then all of a sudden, done, you know, 0 to 1,000 in 10 seconds. Can you just kind of tell me like how SE might help that?
Yeah. One thing I'll say is, if you feel like you're fine and then you're flying off the handle, there might just be not enough awareness of not being fine. You know, there might be a compensation of either intellectual bypassing or being in the head, or some sort of unawareness of when the body is reaching its limit. There also could be a very small buffer that you've got, a small range before you do hit. With SE, what you would do is you probably go through freeze a lot in sessions, but then when you go through them, you know, just not feeding the freeze with more thoughts, with more fears about the freeze. And then you want to have somebody working with you because you're at maximal arousal, maximum stress. If you're going to, you want to be working with a practitioner who can help you actually discharge this energy. And they're going to do it in a very titrated way, meaning just a section at a time. They're not going to put you into something big because you're going to max out so quickly. So you're going to be dipping your toes in, clearing something, dipping your toes in, clearing something. You got to be resourcing after every clearing. You got to be doing this in a very safe and gentle way. And then slowly your set point will become lower. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Liz.
Yes, hi. Thank you. That was really a wonderful experience. Thank you. So my apologies if this is too intellectual question, but
Oh, intellectual questions are welcome during this
okay,
part.
good. So I started working with an SE practitioner, and then she started moving into NARM, which is Neuroaffective Relational Model, I think it stands for. And I think I talked to her about why she did that she just saw better results. But I'm curious, is there much overlap between SE and NARM? And do you think one is better for certain situations than the other? What are your thoughts about it?
I wish I knew more about NARM. So I'm aware of it. I haven't studied it at all. I know there are a lot of SE practitioners who have studied NARM. So a lot of us who have gone through the SE program then specialize in different things, or we merge different things. So my mentor, Tatiana, she does SE, plus she's doing somatic movement. And so she merges those together. For me, I'm doing this and I'm merging some other techniques. The reason I'm not saying the name of the techniques I'm doing is because they're unnamed as of yet. One of my teachers, he's written a book and he then decided not to publish it, but he's the one who's allowed me to practice these techniques, but there's not a name for them yet. And so, so some of these SE practitioners have gone the NARM approach. I've heard great things about NARM. I just don't know enough to answer that question properly.
Okay, cool. Thank you,
but I think
Nina.
it's worth looking into. Yeah.
Great.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Anna.
Yes, so since this is a 12-step group, this is Anna, how does this relate to our inability to, like we cannot forgive easily, we don't let go of pain and suffering and attachment to suffering, and also like they tell you not forgiving someone or resentment is the first offender. Can you talk about this, please, in relation to 12-step and forgiving someone? Thank you.
Sure. So I'll talk about it through this model. I wish I was more familiar. Like I'm aware of the 12 steps. I haven't gone deeply into them, but I'm in general aware. But what I would say in regards to this model is that it's all about the emotional self-regulation skills. So none of us were taught, almost none of us were taught how to be with our emotions about our thoughts growing up. And so we did the best way we could with our compensations, just trying to survive our lives. However, all these emotions arise, and then I can try to forgive and try to override my feelings, but I might run into some difficulties. I think forgiveness is a wonderful thing. I think it has to be done on your terms. I don't think it's something that should ever be forced. I think we can say, when I'm ready, I will forgive. But I think a large contributor to the ability to forgive is being able to process the emotions that arose from the overstepping that occurred, from the violations that occurred in our past. And so if I'm going to forgive, but I'm still loaded with all of the shame and resentment, and I don't know how to process that physically in my body, it's going to be really hard for me to do that. So if you see with the experiential exercise, nothing changed with the facts of what had happened to everyone, but the emotions changed. And then when I'm not in as much pain, it can be a lot easier to forgive. That being said, I still think there's a lot of validity. If you're able to forgive, you can, and that's going to also reduce the amount of emotions that are constantly being created, that are constantly being recreated by the thoughts we're having when we're unable to forgive, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, next hand, it just says iPad.
Hi there. Thank you all for your service, and thank you, Nina, for putting on this program. Very much enjoyed just what happened. One last question. When you
Yes.
said go to the part of the body that doesn't feel anything, I could only go to one part of the body, which was the muscle of my calf. In other words, every other part of my body felt something. So what does that mean?
It's not that you go to the part of the body that didn't feel anything. It's that you go to the part of the body that feels good. And then if no part of the body feels good, then you go to a part that feels neutral. But we're trying to access the part that does not feel uncomfortable so that you can realize that there are resources available within your body.
Okay, perfect. You were wonderful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to B. It's the letter B on my screen. And you'll need to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Sorry, I got called on a little sooner than I was expecting, but somebody else asked something very near this question about the set point. And when you were talking about people who, you know, when you touch them, they don't just jump, but they jump in like a really crazy way. I have that, I also have absurd reactions to noise. I mean, just absurd reactions to noise. Like my heart just goes from like 0 to 1,000,000 with noise. And like to the point that it's like, I really feel like I can't even bear to be in my own body. And this happens, it happens at work. It happens at home. And like the way that I want to react is to like hit the person with a tennis racket. Like that's how I want to react, or like run out on the street and tell this person, you know, like to shut up. And obviously that's not the proper way to behave. So I do suppress it. But I'm aware it's like a crazy outsized reaction. It's not like a large reaction. It's like crazy outsized reaction. So the question, I guess, is in terms of, I know you specialize in SE, but just sort of like larger spectrum of things. Do you know whether things like EMDR or neurofeedback or SE, or what is the most effective thing? And first of all, I guess the first question is that an example of a very high set point? And also, what sort of modality do you most recommend for helping to bring that set point down? If it is in fact, you know, I've got the startle response too, really outsized as well. But what is the modality you most recommend in that situation?
Yeah, so what comes to mind for me, I don't think it would be out of the question to get a medical evaluation. So somatic experiencing, it's not a silver bullet. It's something that can be used within a multidisciplinary approach. So I don't think if it's a severe reaction, I would get that checked out medically. In addition, it could be an exaggerated startle response. I think that there could be a history of trauma, whether you're aware of it or not. That would be
a history of trauma. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Around noise.
No, but around like invasion of the body sort of stuff.
Yeah. And if that is a trauma that's getting triggered, then it could be a fight response that's coming up for you. And you could punch your couch. You could punch your, pillow on your mattress when that happens, but do that without engaging in cultivating further thoughts of anger. If you can do it with a clear mind or a blank mind while you're just simply watching the body punch and, really do this fight response, execute this fight response, you can clear a lot of that from the body. But if you keep having angry thoughts about the person who's doing it, you're basically feeding that anger, and you could be doing that forever. So you can do it in a very, deliberate way and see if that can dislodge some of that. That'll be a nice experiment for you. And it could help a little bit diagnostically as well, based on the result you get with that.
Okay. And what do you recommend somatic experience for that?
I think SC would be great. I still think, getting it checked out medically, but yeah, I think SC would be a great start for that.
Talk to
Before,
doctors about it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
that's okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I have talked to doctors about it.
Okay. Okay, good. So at least you've got, major stuff screened out in that case. So I think SC would be a good start because EMDR, it's easier if you remember the trauma that was done in order for that to work. And I mean, and maybe there's something I don't know about that because I'm not trained in EMDR. I don't know all the ins and outs. But what I can tell you with SC is you don't have to even remember what happened, or like if it's a noise related trauma that you're not aware of. And then the traumas you are aware of, even if they're not noise related, what they can do by clearing them is they will also bring your set point down. It's really cool how this works. Even if you don't find the exact trauma, anything you clear is going to increase the size of your emotional resiliency container, your capacity, and it's going to bring your set point down overall. And then you might have it might take more for your threshold to get crossed.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next it says iPhone.
That's me. I'm Wendy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Wendy.
I have three questions. I have three things written down. I'm an empath, and I did not know that term until a couple of years ago or so, when my therapist at the time told me that I was pretty much the most highly sensitive empath she's ever met, or maybe the second. And that's one statement. Also, my experiencing today was having to do with my jaw clenching, and I've had a mold made at my dentist for a night guard because I literally have wear on my teeth. You can literally see from where I'm grinding my teeth. And I'm not only just grinding my teeth at night and clenching my jaws, but I'm doing it in the daytime because I'm in the process of a really stressful divorce. But I had been doing it throughout the marriage too for 21 years about or so, maybe. I've been doing it for some period of time in there to the point or somewhere in my life. And I was maybe at about a 10 before we started today, went down to about a 2.5. And it was such a euphoria at the end that it went from a blue solid in my jaw areas down to about a 2.5 flowing yellow gas that was moving. It was wonderful. I wanted y'all to not talk. I wanted y'all to pause everything and not go back. I literally tried to do that. I was like, I just want to stay right here in this euphoria. And after coming back and listening to y'all start talking again, which I wanted to learn more about it because it's clearly, I'm so thankful to my creator that this is really something that I've done I've done something very similar to this before, but I liked this experience better. But well, I shouldn't say that. I've done something very similar and it was helpful and this was helpful. It's Holy Spirit. It's not the person. Like it's been different practitioners, nothing whatsoever against you. I'm so thankful for you. I liked things about your voice and that you were talking to me like I was a little kid. It felt so good. Or I perceived it that way. It was so wonderful. But yeah, I'm so thankful that our creator is so intelligent that this is really something that we can't take the credit for it. Or practitioners can't. Of course, you can take the credit for doing your part, but this was just absolutely wonderful. But it went down to 2.5, and now it's back up to maybe about a 5 after listening to talking and stuff and the stress of being back in my life again. But it was such a wonderful, euphoric place that I don't think try to recreate. It was so wonderful. It was green grass up on a ledge, and I thought, wow, it was a fear thing, and she might be going to make me something about jumping off or falling off of that into, it was a very big ravine, and the waterfall itself was blue or purple, something like not even a waterfall, but that trauma going down there into that very deep ravine that I didn't see. So anyway, it was real. It was just real. It's from my creator. Yeah. And the other thing is I want to know what green juice you're drinking. Thank you.
So
is it celery?
It's called lemon ginger blast. You can look up that recipe, and it's I drink it every day. So and so what I'll say is you're correct. We can't really take credit for it because our body is designed to be able to release trauma. All we did with that exercise was techniques to help the mind get out of the way. The ego, the part of us that thinks we know better than how the body is designed to heal itself. And so you're right. It's really something we've been gifted with, this body that is always having our back, that's always self-healing, that's always looking out for us. And so
wonderful. Thank you. Also the clenching, when you started talking, I felt my teeth touching one another. It's back, it's coming back more and more and more the farther I get away from that up there on that grassy place over the ravine. So what would you recommend for me? Looking up Tatiana?
Yeah, I would, because if you're automatically going back into clenching, coming back into your habitual way of being in this world, I imagine that there's a lot of unaddressed traumas. I imagine there's a lot of thoughts circulating that are likely recreating some of this. And that being in that grassy area is not what made you feel better. It's that you felt better, and that grassy area is the result of that. I don't want to say it for sure, but I think, because I wasn't there, you know your experience best, but that is what I think happened.
I agree.
Okay. And so it's very important to realize, okay, it's not that I have to go recreate that grassy area. That's not what cured me. What cured me is that I stopped resisting the feelings I was feeling, and I allowed them to flow through my body. I allowed my mind to step out of the way. And then I got to experience something very peaceful. And that is something that I am designed to experience. I'm designed that I can easily access all these things that I need to self-heal. Maybe I need a little bit of direction. So if you're coming back into talking and thinking, all the old programs start up again. But for a moment, we put those aside so you can at least see, hey, I can heal. This does work. This can work. And I have people pick something small, not only because it's practical and it's safe for a group session, but because I want that to be their first experience so that they can see how this works and that it works. Because when you start working on larger traumas, you're not going to be able to do it in a 30-minute session. Your largest trauma, you're going to need a few sessions to do this. But when you have an initial experience of something small and you see how it shifts and how the body can heal, then you have the faith in actually trying it longer, and you're going to have the determination and the perseverance to actually see it through, to clear some of these larger things. So I would hands down recommend someone like Tatiana or somebody in your area.
Thank you. 2 quick points. First, our next person I'll call on is Ella. After that, I'm going to jump to a different person named Grace, who was contacting me, and for technical difficulties, she was unable to raise her hand. So I've kind of had her in a mental queue here. Also, because we have so many hands raised and these are great conversations, I'm going to ask people, if at all possible, try to put at the top of your list like the one question you really want to ask, because I want to make sure we get to as many people as possible. Thank you guys so much. So next is Ella, and then after that, I will call on Grace. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, I'm wondering what's a reasonable fee range for this? I did do some somatic experiencing with someone, and she's charging like $150 an hour, which may well be worth that, but you know, that's a pretty big hit. And is that the standard? And number 2, when you talk about dipping your feet in and titrating, can you talk a little bit more about that? And how does the therapist know? I mean, how do you do that? And the third thing I had, but perhaps it's just EMDR, I understand.
Hold on, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm not going to remember the first 2 questions if you tell me the third. So let me answer these and then you can tell me the third. So the cost, when I graduated from the program, the cost cost. The national rate was 100 an hour. I actually haven't looked it up, what the national rate is right now, but I know that people's rates, like in New York, people are charging $225. In California, people are charging $185. Mine is $125. I kept it at 100 for a long time. I hired an employee, and so it just changes things for me. But yeah, I would say like 100 would be a great deal, and Tatiana would be willing to see you at that rate. And 150, I don't know what state that person is in. What state is that person in?
Colorado.
So that might be worth what it is in Colorado. You know, I wouldn't imagine something like that in Tennessee to be a 150, but maybe in Colorado. And then what was your second question?
What's it look like to titrate? How do you do that process, and how does the therapist know?
The therapist will know by reading your body cues and by checking in with you verbally. And so they're not going to say, keep going, if your eyes are open wide and you're like shaking. They're going to say, okay, we need to calm down, we need to resource, we need to feel this through before we go into any other aspects of this memory. So what I like to tell people to titrate, as you even think about the fact that we're going to talk about that thing, tell me what comes up for you. So we're not saying, hey, just think about when that happened. No way, that's way too traumatizing. As you even think about the fact that we're going to talk about it, what comes up for you, and then the top layer of it's going to come up. You might feel some fear. Then we pause, we don't go any deeper into the memory, and we use techniques to clear what is coming up. Okay, then we retest it. As you think about it again, that we're going to talk about that, what comes up, and then maybe another layer comes up, and we keep doing that till nothing else comes up. Then we will go to another part of that memory. And the order we go on depends on a lot of different things. Okay, I have to know the story, I've got to know, but I might choose to start with, can you think about the first moment where you knew that you were okay and that you survived? And you might have never gotten to that moment yet, because oftentimes when people have gone through trauma, they're so hypervigilant about preventing a future trauma because it's never landed that they survived. They're still in this state where they're totally in fight or flight. And so they might have tears. They might just feel, okay, can you feel any level of safety now that it's over? Now that it's 2020, we're not invalidating the severity of what happened, but we're really trying to calibrate, like now it's over. Sometimes that can help to provide a little bit more resourcing and landing in the body. And then we'll start going to different aspects of the memory. By the time you get to the point where it actually happened, the worst moment of that memory, it's not going to be as severe as what you thought it was going to be, because we've been pulling out charge from all these other aspects of the memory where all of that stuff was accumulated together. And so it felt huge. We are going and we're sectioning off different parts of it. That's the titration. And then in the feeling itself, we can do a titration. So if this feels too intense, this is in my throat, I can say, okay, just focus on this part of it. And we're just going to work on this. Now we're going to work on this part. Now we're going to work on this part. Now we're going to work on this part. So, and we're reading the body cues to figure out when we need to do that, when it's safe and when it's safe to do something more intense.
Oh, thank you. And I think I'll pass as requested by Jessica.
Thank you. Next, I'll ask Grace to unmute herself.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask just very briefly if you have any suggestions as far as self-regulation techniques when we find ourselves in a state of hypoarousal, that very sort of lethargic depression?
Yeah, so with that, there are ways that you can increase the energy in the system. I really recommend looking at diet. We need to be eating foods that increase the life force within us. So I recommend having some sort of raw foods in the diet. So fruits, vegetables.
Next, I'll call on CB.
Hi, I'm a bit dissociated, so I just wrote down my questions. Basically, I've had a tension headache for 8 years, like every day, no break. So just if you can give me some resources. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is there
I'm
like
so
a way
sorry
to
to
be in
hear
touch
that.
with you?
Yeah. So tension headaches, have you had a physical therapy evaluation or a neurological evaluation?
I've been to a doctor and they said nothing's wrong physically.
Oh, and you've had like diagnostics and everything as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you seen a physical therapist?
Physical therapist, no.
I would definitely do that and get that evaluated. And if it's not that, then you could, go the trauma route. But I'd really want to screen out and be very careful the physical components of that. So, PTs can look at, your muscle imbalances. They can look at your ergonomics of, your work situation, ergonomics of your car, posture, all the things that can be physically contributing to this. You want to make sure you acknowledge all that. And then you can look at the trauma route where it could be tension that's being stored in the body. So and there could be other things like hydration and, possibly detoxification, because when the liver is congested, we can get lots of muscle tension that's just constantly there. And so for me, you guys see me drinking this green juice. Whenever I do that, all my muscles relax everywhere because I'm not overloading my body as well, not overloading the liver.
Yeah. Is there a way to be in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website is on here. And it's just that if you want to work with me, I'm basically overwhelmed with clients right now because I put a lot of videos online. So I have an internet presence now. So it'll be a bit of a wait if you want to work with me, but you're welcome to contact me. And what I ask people to do if you do want to work with me is to fill out the forms before you even contact us. And then we can set up something, but it's not going to be till February, unfortunately. And I might be able to make an exception for you since you're in so much pain. I might be able to get you in earlier because I do have compassion for it. It sounds really hard. But yes, so you could try that. And but it's really nice to have a physical therapist. I don't know where you live, but it's nice to have a physical therapist do a screening on you so we can differentiate between what is physical and what could be emotional.
Your email is on the website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dakota.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you so very much for calling on me, and thank you for your service. I was actually heading into a different room, so I didn't expect to be called on. Love that surprise. Thank you so much, Nina, for this workshop. This was amazing. I've had a lot of experience with SE. I've had one experience working with an SE practitioner before Corona. And when you shared the directory, I actually Googled and found that one of my colleagues, my professional colleagues, I also work in wellness, is an SE practitioner, and I didn't know this about her. So it's great for me I had an intuitive sense about my colleague, but now I have just that much more affirmation that it's time to jump into this work for myself. My question was about, I have two questions. The earlier one is my first one's a little bit more clinical. When you showed us the first slide, where we had parasympathetic on both sides, and it was a line graph where you were giving like really clear examples of what are some ways that our body might have been expressing overdrive or when we're at baseline. And for some reason, I've associated the green line was kind of where we want to be at most of the time, and the red was when we were in overdrive. It was new to me to know that you can be in the parasympathetic aspect of your nervous system and also be in overdrive. So so that was new to me. I heard that a little bit differently than I had in the past. So my question is around learned helplessness. For me, I have day-to-day trauma being, I think, a Black woman on planet Earth. Like, one example is I'm getting divorced, and I've noticed my ex was white. I've noticed that when my ex would deal with my landlord, no problems. Since my ex has moved out of the home, it's like a day-to-day trauma, just trying to communicate with my landlord. So just like low level, we have mice. One of the triggers I was going to work with was what came up for me when I saw a mouse in my home, which is a new experience that I've not had since my ex was the person that always dealt with it. And so the first task was very hard to choose, because I also have abandonment trauma. It just feels like a lot of the lower level traumas in my life translate or interdigitate into my abandonment trauma in general. So my question is about learned helplessness. You had said something before we went to the exercise about one of the examples of overdrive is just a generalized fatigue, where a person might be just feeling lethargy and depression. I think
that would be more of an underdrive, but I can see how that could be an overdrive too, just having had to maintain that level of adrenaline for so long. I can see how that can be depleting as well.
Yeah, that's what resonated with me, because sometimes I haven't been actively diagnosed with it, but I've had this sense that like so many low level day-to-day microaggressions might accumulate to chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue. And so my thought is, I see at times my mother dealing with this kind of, when I think about the thoughts that would correlate with somebody who's chronically fatigued, I look at my mother as an example, a very capable woman, but often outsources myself and my brother to do every single task under the sun. And I wonder so we have this paradigm in 12-step called exertion exhaustion. And what causes me overwhelm is I'll start my day with like several to-dos, wash my floors, look at my finances, send emails. Just small tasks tend to accumulate so quickly that I don't tackle any of them. And then what ends up happening is I'm down for the count on my couch, and the only thing I can do is watch TV and eat a bag of chips. That's a very consistent snapshot.
Okay. And is your question kind of how to be with that? What to do with that?
Yeah, my question, I guess, I've noticed between the exercise we did today and somatic experiencing on the table in a one-on-one with a practitioner, they were quite different results. And I'm curious, like, what would you say is the middle road? Like, if I were to do a one-on-one session now, virtual, what would that look like for the condition that I'm trying to deal with?
I'm not sure how it was different for you in each of the sessions. So I'm not sure what the middle would look like, but is it something where one session worked for you and the other one didn't? Is that, just very briefly, is that what it was?
Well, I thank you for that follow-up question. It gives me an opportunity to reiterate that I don't know that I would do this by myself. I've had friends who did table work, just, very, very gentle work, where 2 days later, they were flooded, emotional flashbacks completely. And so for me, when I left the table work, it was gentle. I didn't really know, it's hard to quantify like 2 days after the session what I'm supposed to be feeling. But I also wonder if this kind of work is accumulative, meaning I have to be doing this every week. Like, my biggest question was, what was the frequency?
Yeah, the frequency is usually once a week. Somatic experiencing is usually not table work. Sometimes that if people have gone to further touch training, then they can do some sort of touch work. But it's 90% of the time it's not any touches involved. It's more talking and helping the client facilitate their awareness on their own sensations and learning how to emotionally regulate their sensations. So I would try to do it once a week with the practitioner, and you should be noticing some sort of difference almost every session.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think I feel complete right now. My other question was just really short. Have you read Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score? And what are your thoughts about that? Would you recommend that?
I definitely recommend that. It's probably the most famous book around this. And it's been years for me. I actually want to read it again. So yeah, it's just a classic. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, and as much as possible, I'm going to remind folks, let's try to keep it to one question so that everybody has a chance to ask a question as needed. Trudy, you are next.
And let's try to keep these questions under a minute if we can, if possible.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't expecting to be called on, so I'm not, sorry. I just want to say, first of all, I've just so enjoyed your talk, so much wisdom and knowledge. And yeah, I think for me, I have had somatic experiencing before. And actually, the lady that I went to see actually referred me for EMDR, interestingly enough. And I'm in training actually to be a therapist, a relational and integrative therapist.
Great.
But the course has worn me out over the last 2 years, and I've actually had to defer a year. And that this is kind of the thing for me. It's my level of I don't know how even really to explain it, but I get worn out very quickly. It's like my system or my being seems to take in so much, and it's like I get really exhausted. And for me, I guess I don't even know how to put this as a question, because obviously this is my ongoing journey. I'm an ACA, you know, I'm in recovery, and all the other things that I do. Also, something I've found that has really helped me is dance, 5 rhythms dance. And you did talk about that, didn't you? The somatic movement. That has been so helpful for me. Because one of my things was about talking. So even now I can feel in my body this kind of anxiety about talking, and how that can be. I guess my question is, how do I, so say if I try to challenge myself to go and be with people, to partake and be around people, I tend to go into an exhaustion, and I know it is to do with trauma, and that's what we're talking about, and it's about how it's been in my body, and I think I have released trauma, but I do still have this ongoing problem of exhaustion, which then leads me to start feeling very depressed, like the other lady was saying, you know, sometimes not being able to get off the couch. And I'm just really interested to know what you would suggest for that.
Yeah. So I would, you know, when you say that, when you challenge yourself to be in these social situations, I strongly advise against, you know, over challenging oneself into doing some of these things if the body is saying the opposite. So if the body is exhausted, let's give the body what it needs. Let's actually look at what the body is asking for and give it what it needs, because we've all been conditioned to override the body's requests that it's making on a daily basis. And so I would just rest those days, or I would, you know, engage socially in a phone call if that feels good to you. I would continuously ask yourself, what do I feel right now, and what do I need? Does this feel good for me, or am I pushing myself to exhaustion? Life is very challenging. There are many, many reasons why we are all exhausted right now, but then there also is conditioning where we've actually taught ourselves to override what our own body is saying to us. So connecting deeply with what the body is asking.
So listening more to myself.
Listening, setting boundaries for other things that may be exhausting you, really respecting yourself and how you feel and your body, rather than the mind or the programming, which is conditioned to tell you to keep going anyway, keep doing it anyway. Respect where you're at.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But actually in practice, I think I've learned to push and push, and my body, what happens is I end up getting really ill, and I have to start really listening now.
The body is saying no to you. The body is saying no to this kind of lifestyle, and it's going to be turning a ship around. It's going to be years and years of conditioning in this direction that need to be slowly turned around over time with repeated effort. And the effort is going to be in the direction of resting.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you. Pleasure to hear you. Thank you.
All right, Michelle, you are up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do a lot of, I've done a lot of trauma work in EDMR. So I just, I can't have people touch me, or I get really uncomfortable and angry at the emotion when people are near me. So I don't want to, I don't want to live like that. So that, it really helped. But as soon as you started talking, I just started crying. So I think I know what that is. I know it's good, but yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. There's loads I want to ask you, but as you started talking, the tears just came out of my eyes, you know, even I was imagining the shape, the texture, and I feel emotional now. So yeah, so I'll just say, yeah, what does that mean?
So
tears.
it's
And
really,
I can't cry at the moment.
Yeah.
And
it's really common that when I'm speaking to the sensation, that's what you mean?
yeah, well, yeah. As soon as you started speaking, I think, I can't remember because it was so lovely. It was, well, you know what I mean, healing.
Yeah.
But as soon as you opened your mouth, the tears started coming. And then as you started talking to the sensation, well, whoa, they were just flooding out.
So this sensation wants to feel seen. This is, you could think of it as the paradigm of our inner child, but all that means is our unmet psychological needs. And they're stored as these physical sensations in our body that are unseen. And they want to be seen. They want to be heard, loved, recognized. They want to be listened to. They want to be cared about. And so the dialogues we're using, we're addressing them. We're actually acknowledging them. We're talking to them, and we're talking to them honestly. We're not saying, oh, I love you so much and you're so great. No, we're saying, hey, I'm really sorry, I'm afraid of you, because that's the truth. We are engaging with them authentically. We are seeing them, and we are giving them a chance. We're like, can you please show me what you are? We're giving them a chance to show us even more of them, because they were not seen growing up, because there was no space for these emotions to be processed growing up. They've just been buried. These emotions from childhood, which are so raw and tender, they've been buried all these years. And so when they're seen, that crying is one of the ways that these emotions are released physically from our bodies and nervous systems. Another one is shaking, but crying is a very wonderful way of releasing trauma. For some people, it's laughing. For other people, it's yawning. So this is one of the ways. And so something touched you with those words, and it was something that felt recognized. Does that resonate for you?
Oh, I feel like I'm emotional now. Thank you. And I'll just end it on this. And then I've had back and neck ache. And when you said go to the part that feels good, I didn't even think about it. And I was going to the bit I started with that was in pain. So thank you. Lovely. Thank you. Really loved it. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Next, we have Lisa.
Oh, thank you. This is Lisa. I just echo what everyone else has said. It's been a pleasure listening to you. I noticed when we went through the experience that there was almost like a jello-like feeling. When you started to talk about the sensations, that's what I noticed. And I was the one that didn't raise my hand because I wasn't afraid of it. I was actually enjoying whatever that emotion was because it was so different and didn't frighten me. But my question to you is, and we've touched on these points, people have been touching on them, because as Bessel van der Kolk talks about these little T traumas that you know, because I got this information from the adult child website. So I'm a recovering adult child. I read that red book. I know about the steps. I've been in steps forever, and I still can't seem to heal these relationships. And what you mentioned earlier in the very beginning of your talk is about how our body has these reactions that we don't even give permission to. And that's why I started doing the more core trauma work, and I got therapy and I went into EMDR. But I have heard that EMDR does not work for adult children because of the long-term effects of the trauma. The trauma has gone on and on. It works for those one-time situations like a car crash, or, you know, it's not the Vietnam vet that had a traumatized childhood, but was maybe traumatized, you know, while in war and watching that stuff. So my question to you is, I've done EMDR, and my therapist has said, you know, I get this feeling that you don't want to do this work, but I do want to do it. I just don't understand it. When the brain spotting or the holding the clickers, nothing comes up for me. And I don't know if it's because my inner child doesn't feel safe. I have also done biofeedback, neurobiofeedback. It doesn't make sense to me watching those things. I felt like I was being judged by the computer, if you will. And so my question to you is, this somatic experiencing is something I have never done before, but I immediately felt something within my body. And I thought of a little, like you said, think of something minor. And although it was something that I was pissed off about when I made that thought, I love the sensation that went through my body. So my question is, why is it that the EMDR, I mean, it's not like I can't force this to come up. And why is it that, you know, I guess the somatic experience and feels different? I don't know. Maybe you don't know the answer to that, but I thought I would just ask.
So I'm not trained in EMDR, but what I can tell you is, in general, emotions will arise when they feel safe. So that when there's capacity in our body and our emotional resiliency containers, these emotions will arise. They have space to arise, but also when they feel like they won't be judged, they won't be safe. So if you were interpreting that biofeedback as judging you, it's not going to feel safe to come up. If there was any pressure you felt around the EMDR, if it felt like the protocols were more rigid than facilitated towards you. I'm actually a big fan of EMDR in many cases. Sometimes I will refer people to EMDR therapists instead of SE, but in your case, and especially if it sounds like the SE is resonating for you, I would go a more gentler route to allow for that emotion to arise within you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think next in line is just says M.
Can you hear me now? My internet went off for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask about the polyvagal chart where you talked about how social engagement is helpful in kind of bringing our sympathetic nervous system down or something. I don't know the term. So I just wanted to know if you could expand on that a little bit, and if there's any place where I could read a book about it or something, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, Stephen Porges has a book on polyvagal theory if you want to like really go deep into the technicalities of it. So that would be like the gold, standard place to look for that information. But yeah, in general, social engagement can pull us into the ventral vagal area, and the opposite, being in the ventral vagal area can make social interaction feel comfortable. However, if we have traumas around social engagement, it might not feel that way until we've cleared some of those traumas. So you really want to see, just because something is kind of said as a statement like that, see, is that true for me? Is that true in my experience? And then listen to your body and follow that. And so I really like what Dr. Gabor Mate talks about in a society where we don't feel as connected with each other. Oftentimes we can be prone towards addictions or something to try to fill some of these, this need for some dopamine in our brain and just oxytocin and all these things. And so this social connection is really critical. We are, historically like tribal, like humans were in tribes, and like we're not meant to be so disconnected from each other. So there's not too much more I can really expand on that, but you can look up more about polyvagal theory if you want a more technical explanation, but that's kind of the gist of what I would say around that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next we have JC.
Hi, thank you, Jessica and Dave. It's been an amazing session, and thank you to Nina. Yeah, my questions around the exercise that we did. So I chose an example of I've got a job application in tomorrow. It's about 2,000 words plus 2,500 words. And then I fell asleep when you started talking about the tension I feel a bit in my chest. And now I'm really sleepy and dozy, and I wasn't at all. I was really alert when I came into this session. I feel like my heart's beating. I'm on overdrive. And the final thing is that I've done internal family systems with a bit of somatic experiencing before, but it was much more, the guy felt I needed IFS more than SE. I'm just wondering whether, I'm not seeing him now, whether I need to go back to SE or anyway. But most urgently, what can I do now so I can get this form done today or tomorrow? I don't want to go into some sort of shutdown. That'd be horrible, because I was okay before. And I've mapped out what I want to write. I know what I want to write. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I understand. So you're feeling like you're in this lethargic shutdown, but at the same time, your heart is beating quickly. Is that true?
It's calmed down now a bit since listening to the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, you just need to move around, basically. It's not something that you're permanently like that. It's nothing like that. You just got some sort of release that puts you into parasympathetic. Your body's probably, I'm guessing, I don't want to speak for you, but I would guess that the body is actually rested and calm right now. And maybe that's unfamiliar, but do you feel like that's correct? Does that resonate for you, or am I off?
No,
Only you're going to know.
I feel spacey, and I wasn't before this. Before doing this exercise.
You need to ground. You need to resource. So I would do some of this stuff. I don't know if Dave got a chance to put that physical resourcing video in the comment section. Okay.
I did, but I can put it again.
Yeah, he's nodding, but he said he can put it again. Do that video, and it's going to talk about all the ways to get back in your body to resource and ground. If you happen to have a weighted blanket, you could do that, or you could just squeeze your body and push everywhere. Or you could wear tight clothing, something that's compressive. That's going to help you get back into your body. Some kind of fidget toy, touching different textures, smelling essential oils, going for a walk, looking at things, engaging your senses is going to get you back into your body. Even having an intellectual conversation, even if it's not intellectual, talking about whatever, just the talking, it's going to get you back into your mind. Basically, you got really into your body, probably had to deal with some stuff. Maybe it was a little bit more than you had capacity for. Maybe there was slight dissociation that was happening. This stuff is not permanent. This stuff is totally like, it's always transient. So you want to start doing things like have a conversation about facts or the weather or something with somebody, pick up the phone and talk to somebody and engage in your senses, and then watch this video for other ways to ground. And if it's still an issue, then I'll also, you can reach out to me within the next half hour if it's still an issue.
Great, thank you very much. So Dave will post the video, and with a cool shower help as well, maybe.
Yes, because it'll get you into the body. It's going to wake up the senses, and it'll pull you out of the dissociation.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Thank you so much. That makes sense.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have telephone caller with area code 916.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I had a pretty amazing experience, kind of a primal gut feeling of icky to a pretty transformational feeling good. My question is, do you recommend or do you have any experience in dealing with addictions? Because I felt pretty good afterwards, and I have an eating disorder. I wanted to go eat. And I actually kind of did the technique again on that, but I'm curious if you have any if you would recommend or have any experience working with addictions. And there's something in ACA called addicted to excitement, like, at least for me, like positive things. So I'm curious if you could speak to that. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I would recommend Tatiana for that. I do have experience in that, but she probably has more. And with the wanting to eat after, I just don't know what type of eating disorder you have. So I don't know if that was a positive or a negative for you as far as wanting to eat.
Positive. It was sweets. I have a sugar addiction.
So positive in the sense that were you wanting to eat something non-sugary then, something healthy for you?
No, I wanted to celebrate. It's like, wow, this is really cool.
Oh, I see. The addiction to excitement and positive sensations. Yeah. And so whenever we have an addiction to positive sensations, we're usually running from a negative sensation or one that we perceive to be negative. So when you want to do something like, yay, just say, well, what would I feel if I didn't do this? And that's the feeling you're running away from, and find and identify that feeling in your body. And that's the one you need to work with. And then once you take care of it, you're not going to want to medicate with sugar.
Oh, okay. All right. Can you say that one more time? What you said, go to what you don't?
Yeah, sure. So if I'm wanting sugar, why do I need a high? I'm usually trying to get over a low, or it's just a habitual pattern. I just think I need to celebrate with something that makes me feel high. And so I need to find the sensation that I'm running away from. So I ask, okay, what if I didn't eat the sugar right now? What would I feel? And then I think about it. Okay, I don't get to eat it. Oh, and my stomach feels heavy and my chest starts, beating. That's what I'm running away from. I just wasn't conscious of it. I'm unconsciously running from those feelings and medicating with the sugar rather than being with myself and taking care of the underlying feelings.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And this was awesome. Just thank you for your generosity.
Sure. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear this. May I ask you, when you went to therapy, why did they call the police? Were they afraid for your safety?
Yeah, they are afraid for my safety.
Okay, I don't want to ask you too many personal questions in a public forum, but I would probably need to ask you a few questions to understand that better. And so what I will say is it sounds like, I'm going to just kind of skip the questions and make an assumption here. And so it sounds like you'd benefit from seeing somebody who is the licensed psychotherapist. And so like for me, for example, I'm a physical therapist who does SE. And so I don't have training in the context of things where if somebody's, if there's certain safety considerations, I always screen that out when I get people that I work with because it's not within my scope. But if you were to see a licensed psychotherapist, they would actually be trained in things that would be, concerning regarding your safety. And does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
I guess I just think that I need just more like trauma work. Why am I so stuck? Like I feel stuck, and I felt fear before, but it's just from old trauma. And so how do I get out of it? It's just so I can just live. I can't even, like, I'm trying to, I was a previous massage therapist, and that gave me a feeling of safety. Like I've been touched inappropriately. So it almost gave me a sense of control where I could feel like I can touch someone and they can feel safe. They feel safe with me. And it helped me to ground. And, I've just been so far removed from that and removed from people. And then, I remove myself from a relationship, and
Yeah, it sounds really intense.
It's intense.
You definitely need to be working with a professional who is also trained in trauma work. So when I say a licensed psychotherapist who also is an SE practitioner, and most of them are, so 80% of people, or maybe 90% of people who are SEPs, somatic experiencing practitioners, they are they're licensed mental health practitioners. There's only 10 or 15% of us who are not, who are in other aspects of the medical field. So almost any SE practitioner you talk to would have this other credential where they could help you in both ways. And so I would look on the directory for that, and we could help you find somebody.
Okay, thank you so much.
But please work with somebody. This sounds very, very intense, and you really need that support right now.
I do. I really do.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you so
hope you
much.
feel better soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love the spiritual angle in this work, so I'll kind of address it from that point as well, but I'll also add the SE component. So notice if the mind has the belief that it needs to get rid of this sensation in order for it to be okay or to be healed, because we're always going to be feeling sensations and emotions in our bodies. That's how we're designed to survive our lives here on the planet. They inform us in so many ways. And so we can never escape our biology. There is an idea that many people have that as we resolve certain traumas, that we're going to actually lose the sensation that is stored around it. Oftentimes that can happen, but if there is mental resistance against it, if there's a mental agenda to get rid of it, that resistance exactly is what keeps it there. So I just kind of notice if that could be there. The other part is that it's okay for the sensation to be there because we're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to get rid of the resistance to the sensation. So sometimes once we've done that, the sensation will decide to stay, but it'll feel pleasant. Another angle that I would say about this is that if something is a long-standing issue, a chronic trauma, it might be a sensation that needs long-term care, and to have a relationship developed with it, an ongoing check-in and an unconditional love for this sensation, which is part of your experience. If any part of you is secretly plotting to get rid of it, it knows and it does not feel unconditionally loved. So we have to say, and I don't know if you're familiar with Rupert Spira, he's one of my favorite spiritual teachers.
Yes.
And he talks about, you tell the sensation, the emotion, you are allowed to be here forever. And that is my favorite technique of all of it, because I'm on the spiritual path myself, and I love Rupert Spira and everything that he does. And so when you can have that kind of relationship with it, that's unconditional love for your experience.
Yeah.
And see what happens. But it may still stay there, but you have to be okay with that, because your happiness is not dependent on whether this sensation stays or goes. Your happiness, your peace is dependent on whether your resistance to it stays or goes. Always remember that. I might have said it that way. It's not 100%, but the resistance of it will go, which means that the pain of it, the density of it, the discomfort of it will go also. But you might still notice the emotion in and of itself. So the emotion doesn't cause pain. It's the emotion plus the resistance that causes the density and the uncomfortable nature. So I might have said it that way, but that's what I meant to clarify. One thing I noticed in your question is that you talked about the emotion in conceptual terms. You said it was stress and anxiety and PTSD. And I would just, and maybe you've already done this, but I would just keep looking at it as a physical, what is it? Okay, it's tingling, it's prickling. It's really look at it in that primary experience way. Because if you stay in conceptual terms, you will miss the opportunity to be able to clear it. You have to go fully into the direct experience. There might be other things that, that I'm missing right now in not knowing the situation better, but I think it's worth continuing to explore and developing a long-term relationship with, and then finding a practitioner who might have you know, different ideas of how to work with it. But it sounds like you're doing great. Everything you've said is far more than what most people are doing. I'll just say that those of you who are interested in the spiritual aspect, I think that could be a really good fit, because I do that with about 10% of my clients that are open to that. But what that can allow us to do is to remember that we are actually not the body, we are not the mind. You know, we're not the emotions. We are the witness to these. And so oftentimes we're trying to get rid of aspects of our experience. But what can be more helpful is grounding in that which we are. And once we have direct experiences of what we are beyond that. And again, I'm not preaching for any of you, just take it or leave it if it feels right, you know, but as we're grounded in that which we are, a lot of these experiences are just not as overwhelming, that they're far more manageable. The teacher is Rupert Spira, R-U-P-E-R-T, and last name is S-P-I-R-A, and he's got many YouTube videos and a YouTube channel, and he's brilliant. He's so brilliant that if this would be your first exposure to this work, it'll probably go over your head like it did mine, and you'd want to start with people who are saying it in more simpler terms, like Eckhart Tolle or Adyashanti.
Thank you.
All right, Karen, that means you are up.
Okay, I have no idea because I've never been to a workshop about this before. I've never heard of it before, but I was just going to tell you a little bit about my history. I'll be really quick. I'm 65. My mother passed away 6 years ago, and I started getting a lot of swelling in my ankles and my legs, and putting on weight. And a couple of years later, I finally wound up in AFib and having a mild stroke. And then after that, my hip went, and now my knees have been going. And so, but it's all stabilized now. I actually had my hip replaced, and I'm going to have my knees replaced. But even though I'm on the water pill, I keep getting fluid on my lungs, and if I don't take it regularly, and I did start swimming, but I go to an ACA meeting regularly, and I recently had a person in that meeting that triggered me beyond, like, I mean, I am in like rage, and I intuitively know that there's some kind of mind-body connection between what's going on in my body and whatever you're talking about. Like, there's something that needs to be healed, but I can't see it. Am I making any sense? Is there something that I could process emotionally with this practice that would help me get out of this cycle?
Yeah, so are you seeing a physician?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. So as long as you're doing that, it doesn't hurt to get emotional support. And I think with the symptoms that you're having, it just need to be taken slowly. But anyone who's lost their mother at the age of 5, I mean, there's going to be a lifetime of things that come up around this. And if that has not been processed, if you haven't done body-based counseling work yet, it could be very helpful. Now, whether it will affect your current symptoms, I'm not sure yet because I don't know much about you, but as long as you're getting the medical management, it's not going to hurt your current symptoms. And you might notice, so there's a physical component that's real, that we're dealing with. And then we might have a reaction to the physical component, and that can create an additional layer of emotional charge that this work can take off that emotional layer of additional charge that can help us have more comfort in our body and a better quality of life. It's definitely not going to hurt to get more support around this in your life.
Okay, I was always in great shape. I did power yoga, then hot yoga for like 13 years, and then I stopped everything. And I've tried all kinds of antidepressants. They don't work. They've done nothing for me. And I don't feel depressed. I have like an underlying low level of sadness all the time. And so my intuition tells me there's some emotional healing that that needs to happen that's causing this.
Yeah, listen to that. So the sadness definitely needs attention. It needs care. And my background is a physical therapist. I don't like hot yoga at all. I think it's very, very difficult. It's very hard on the body.
I stopped it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I just wouldn't aspire to return to that. But yeah, I would definitely take care of this sadness. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'd get a professional to help you.
Okay, an SE, an S.
I'd start with that because it's so gentle and all the stuff that you have going on. I think it'd be the ideal place to start with. Yeah.
Okay, so if they're regular practitioner, regular psychologist, then they should take my insurance too, right?
Well, so if it's an SE practitioner that is also some sort of psychologist, who is, I don't know where you live, but in the US, it has to be within the state lines for them to take insurance. And so
in Florida.
You're in Florida. Yeah, so somebody in Florida, and there's many people in Florida that are trained in this. So you need to find somebody who is, an SE practitioner who also is a licensed, because I can't take insurance because I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not going to bill insurance for therapy, but somebody who can do that, who also does SE would be the person you want to look for.
Okay. All right. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate your
Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you so much. Okay.
So
we are going to end the questions there just because Nina has already granted us about 40 minutes longer than we originally had pledged from her. And I am sure that we can go with questions and experiences until tomorrow. So thank you everybody for being here. And then Nina, I'll throw it back to you if you do want to add any final wrap-ups here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for all of you who have just stayed on this long and had the courage to face some of these emotions that arose and to just have the willingness to try this experiential section and just kind of learn about a new way of looking at trauma. I hope it empowers you to just see that there are many options out there, to feel more hope, to learn a few tools that you can try on your own. Please try these with very small things. Please don't do them with large traumas on your own, or you could have destabilizing experiences. I'll say with one way that I feel like this work is can be very helpful, specifically with ACA, is that when children had to be adults at a younger age, there are other parts of themselves that did not get to develop at the same rate emotionally, because they had to kind of take on all these adult responsibilities. So there could be these emotional delays. There could be places that are emotionally underdeveloped. And that's where this SE can really help, because we can see those parts, take care of them, and then that helps to integrate them back up to speed, integrate back up and get all parts online at the adult level again. So I don't think people who our adult children who do a lot of their work, I don't think it's a life sentence either to always feel like you're an adult child. You might, and there's nothing wrong with feeling that way at times, but I think that, that there's a lot of hope for full integration. I just wanted to throw that out there if that inspires people. at all. And what I'll do as we end is I'll put the last slide up. You'll get all the slides, but I'll put the last slide up because I want you guys to have those links. So if you do need a practitioner nearby, you can look at the directory. I have a YouTube channel that has many, many videos about just self-help, ways to frame this, to think about it, how to work with insecurity, how to work with self-hatred, how to love oneself, practical ways to do it, emotional ways to do it. There's a lot of content on there that could help. And, in 2021, I'll be having a Patreon course available. It'll be very, very low price, very affordable, but it's going to be something where I can facilitate people so that they can be kept safe. You saw that there were a couple of people where they had some shaky experiences even in here, and I don't want anyone to be unsupported when that happens. And so there's going to be a curriculum where we're going to clear anger one week and we clear grief another week, and we're going to have a lot of in-depth stuff. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go to my website. That's thesomaticpt.com, and on the home page at the bottom there's a place where you can subscribe to the newsletter and you'll be informed of when that's available. And again, my colleague Tatiana is just brilliant, and she can be of help to any of you who need an immediate session. A couple of you, I mentioned you could probably contact me and I could get you in sooner just because I can see the severity of the situation. But other than that, I'm so grateful for all of your kind attention and to staying to the end. And I wish you much joy and peace. And I wish you very well in life.
This is Dave. I just wanted to make a quick closing statement of my own here before we do this serenity prayer. And for me, my experience has been, and I believe many people have probably seen this today too, that as an adult child with a couple of years, with several years in the program emphasizes reparenting and being your own loving parent and getting in touch with your inner child. And for me, somatic experiencing has been a gateway to actually doing that, where the reparenting work was not at all clear to me. This is something tangible that I can do, and it has helped me tremendously in that regard. That's all I wanted to add. All right, everybody, let's close with a serenity prayer. You can feel free to unmute yourselves. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
The courage
to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you very much, everybody. We went worldwide again.
Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. I feel light. I feel so light. Thank you, Nina.
Beautiful.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina.
Thank you. Blessings.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you,
Thank
Jessica.
you, Nina.
Love you all.